All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And greetings all. I want to welcome any of the new Swedish people who are here. Welcome to NATO, everybody. Yes. We have a brief Pledge of Allegiance. It's actually not so brief. Kind of detailed Pledge of Allegiance. In fact, the whole alliance is really all about the Pledge of Allegiance. So upon reflection, it may take a while. Sorry about the fact that I think Hungary and Turkey weren't crazy for you to join, but I'm happy you're here, Sweden, officially entering NATO's alliance. Yes, there is a wow, Kelly Malloy already with a 5 spot.
Big shout out.
You know, we're a crowd-funded show, so I will stop everything to acknowledge any donation whatsoever. Thank you so much. You can donate. Super Sticker Super Chat is live. And, of course, our PayPal and all that stuff. Albert is here.
Albert, thank you.
And so is Kim.
How are you?
She, of the Nikki Maduro show. She also does another show called The After Party Live. It's just great that she could squeeze us in.
Yeah, you know.
And what a show today. David Katz joins in the second hour. And I have a picture of David Katz with someone famous who is in the news.
What?
So you'll want to see that. I will not give any clues. We will have that in the second hour. Katz, if you are new here, is a brilliant legal mind. And it's not just about being a brilliant legal mind. It's about explaining and decoding what is oftentimes a complex situation when it comes to legal matters and the Constitution, etc. So he is both the brilliant legal mind and the brilliant legal mind who can show you how the puzzle is put together. For that reason, he is in hot demand. BBC in London, you'll hear him on radio all the time there. You'll see him on Fox 5 in New York. You'll see him on CBS in Los Angeles, and again on Fox News Channel here in the States. So really exciting to have him here as a regular guest, the former federal prosecutor, now working the defense side of the table, David Katz, in the second hour. What else do I need to tell everyone about, Kim? I mean, any other guests today?
No, just Mr. Katz.
Good.
But
okay,
the good news is you can go along with him because you've switched Belinda to Wednesdays, which kind of really frees up your David Katz time.
Oh, that's right. I love that. Thank you. Yeah. Very, very good point, because we usually had to sweat when we started that, and now we don't. There is kind of a big deal tonight. It's the State of the Union. Mm-hmm. Joe Biden, I guess that's kind of me starting the show. All right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
There's a State of the Union tonight with Joe Biden proposing increasing the minimum tax rates. It's likely that, in addition, you know how the State of the Union works in general. The president at the State of the Union moment, I'm just saying, in other words, every president does it, reviews the accomplishments of the administration and then lays out something that they'd like to do. And so in the second case, the latter case, that is to say something he wants to do, he will propose a corporate tax cut, raising the minimum tax rate. He wants to raise it from the 15% tax rate that was implemented earlier in his term. I think he wants to go up to 21%. Now, again, these will be multinational corporations that will be affected should this actually go into effect. He also wants to quadruple the tax that companies have to pay when they buy back their own stock. So, right now they pay 1%. Mm-hmm. He wants to make it 4%. It's still minimal. And the stock buyback, as you know, is a way to run up your stock and essentially give your officers in the C-suites at so many of these companies huge bonuses. Anyway, that's one of the things you can watch for tonight. I don't know that there's a reality when it comes to getting into these taxes for all the reasons that you already know. You know, you need to increase those taxes. You'll need congressional cooperation, and you can't get congressional cooperation on stuff that they have crafted. You know, a GOP that is just not playing ball. Elwin, hello everyone, says Elwin. Big shout out. And might I say, Elwin, it's been a while.
Big shout out.
I feel like Elwin used to be a regular visitor. Now, maybe he still is over on your other shows. But on this show, he was MIA. Elwin's back, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for returning to the fold. The prodigal son comes home. I'll get to the exit data on Donald Trump in a moment. There's other news.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I have a Law and Disorder. I like to leave a lot of law stuff for David Katz, and I will get to some of the bigger issues involving Donald Trump and immunity and SCOTUS and expanding the court and the recusal of Clarence Thomas that we'll never see, even as he handles this immunity question, which overlaps with J6, etc. I'll put that to the side for now. But Albert, before I get to Law and Disorder, did you get you've got the video of the guy directing traffic as Donald Trump in New York City?
The Mark Thompson Show.
I have it here. Yep.
It's kind of a little, let's start with something light. I just kind of got a kick out of this, so I thought I'd share it with you. This is a guy who's, this is New York City. Go for it, Albert. It's if you're not watching and you're just listening, it's a guy in a he's big like Donald Trump. He's wearing the blue suit like Donald Trump. He's wearing the red tie like Trump. And he's directing traffic at a busy intersection in New York City. And his physical manner is, it's very, I just love this. I don't know, it just really hit me.
He's got a bit of a swagger to him, doesn't
Yeah,
he?
exactly. And he gets even more swagger. Now he's in the middle of the intersection directing traffic.
That's awesome.
It's just too good. And passersby are all, they're videoing him.
And everybody's like, okay. He says I should go this way or go that way.
He's twirling, windmilling his arms and pointing.
It's the best Trump ever, It really is.
Yeah.
He really is having a moment.
Love New York.
Love that. Thank you,
that's
Albert.
pretty funny.
And thank you, everybody. That was just, I thought someone would get a kick out of that. How about it for Jenny T, everybody?
Happy
Big shout out.
birthday. Happy
$20 super chat celebrating my birthday with you. Wow. Jenny, I'm not going to cry.
I'm not gonna cry.
But I feel very close to crying. I really do. I really do.
I'm not gonna cry.
Jenny, $20, which is very generous of you, first of all. And I want to say thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And I also want to say happy birthday to you.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. We're happy you're with us. Kat Zab for a 5 spot.
Big shout out.
Love you, says Kat Zab.
That's some balloons for Jenny.
Balloons for Jenny and her birthday. Yeah. Shadow producer Calvin Wong says that Trump guy in the intersection of New York is doing more work for Americans than the real Trump. Come on.
Isn't that the truth?
There you go. That's about the only job he's qualified for, says Lisa Collins. Very funny. You can chat with us in real time, as we say. That's kind of live during the show. I like to use that term real time. It makes me seem sophisticated and like tech savvy.
Up to the minute.
Yeah,
Yes.
but it's really just it's a hack jargony thing to say. But I am a hack jargony guy occasionally, and yes, thank you everybody. But what I did want to say also is that your comments are read after the fact. So most people watch this show or interact with the show after the fact. We do look at those comments and we do respond to those comments often. Albert, I wonder if you could please give us a an idea as commissioner of sports on this show and also of Mark's Madness, if you would just let us know, what is the status of the play-in from yesterday, Albert? There were 2 drops that went up against each other. Only one can move on to the round from the first hour, and only one can move on to the round from the second hour. What has happened with the Mark's Madness play-in, and then what is the state of the explainer video? I turn it over to you, Commissioner Albert.
Yes, so there's 2 drops that actually finally made it, which means that the official bracket is out there. So yesterday we had classic Mark Thompson Time Waster go against Movado Watch.
And I thought Movado Watch would win.
Yeah, me too. And our pal Michael Snyder, who did have that classic Mark Thompson Time Waster drop, actually advanced. So
wow,
this is a classic Mark Thompson Time Waster.
That's amazing. I thought Movado Watch would kill it.
You can buy a Movado watch in Sam's.
Wow.
Yeah, I know that's one of your favorite drops.
That's when the preacher was shaking down his congregation for more money.
Yeah.
You know, he was really going after them. Anyway, so he's out, and Snyder, the Culture Blaster, is in. Great. Okay, that's it. Michael will be very happy with that.
And then our very last spot, which was the hour 2 voting, and there was a ton of people that I saw in the comment section who was voting after the fact. So for Mark's Madness throughout the tournament, feel free. If you're not watching live, you could always vote in the comment sections. We do tally those votes. So
yeah, they very much count. In fact, probably in this case, the lion's share of votes will come in after the fact. And so Albert will tally those as commissioner.
Albert, thank you.
And as commissioner, Albert, you are planning an out-of-town adventure. I think you're going to Asia, are you not?
Yes, I'm going to Taiwan, and I will be calling in for the to kick off Mark's Madness, and I'll also be there for the meet and greet that will be the day after.
Now that's the kind of dedication we could use more of around here. Thank you. Yeah, very impressive, Commish. So, Commish... Yeah, go ahead.
I never got to that last drop that made it. It was big shout out versus processes and protocols.
Oh, that's right. Big
shout out.
Now, don't tell me.
We have processes and protocols and standards.
Oh, wait, Kim, which one do you think
Processes and protocols and standards for sure.
Yeah, she would be right. That one wasn't actually close.
Wow.
The hour 1 matchup was a lot closer than that second matchup.
Wow. So processes
we have processes and protocols and standards.
That will move on to Mark's Madness. Now, the actual list of all the drops that will participate in Mark's Madness, which will allow you to pick which one you think will move on in each round, that has been posted or is going to be posted. What's the story, Albert?
It is live as of right now, and I did post an explainer video that posted very late last night after we tallied the votes. So it's officially here. You can look at the bracket here, but if you haven't joined or if you want to join, please watch that video. All the instructions are there. If you have participated before, all you have to do is log into the website we use, Office Pool Stop, and it'll be there automatically since you've already joined before.
That's really cool. So those of you who have joined before, again, it's officepoolstop.com. Those who haven't, watch the video that Albert did. It's really straightforward. He walks you through every step. It is not complicated if you watch the video. And the video is there on our channel. I think it says Mark's Madness. So get the one Mark's Madness 2024, because that's the year we're in, and that will be the contemporary offering. And there's one other bonus in that video. Not only does Albert lead you through it, I mean, the commissioner takes you through every step of the process, but then we also review all of the drops. So if you don't know what one is, because they're sort of coded in there, like the, one of them will say something that doesn't necessarily remind you of exactly what the drop sounds like. We have all the drops there, and before each drop, I say how it's labeled in Mark's Madness. So it's all really straightforward. It's a lot of fun. It seems a bit complicated maybe as we're talking, but the truth is it's not. You just pick one or the other, and in each round, the one that will move on. So I'm excited about it. I'm seeing that people are already sort of picking their favorites. I mean, I think that Chit 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 will I think it could actually rock the entire tourney.
And Chit Chit Chit's actually a number 9 seed, so that's
what was the top seed, Albert?
Good Day Sir, which will be repeating. Looking to repeat as champion.
Oh, right.
Good day, sir.
Right.
It is pretty good.
But I'm seeing some love for We'll Do It Live.
We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
I mean, it has a show bump too. Like every time you mention the after party live,
yes,
we hit that drop.
And it's true. Albert is actually onto something, because the more a drop is played, the more people get attached to it.
Right.
Occasionally, though, you'll get something like I saw from Gordon. Please put "Liar, Liar." Your pants are on.
Liar, liar, your pants are on fire!
Yeah, that's not in that's not in.
No, did not make it. Yeah,
there are a lot of favorites that didn't make it in. I mean, but there are a lot of other favorites that did make it in. Like, I don't think this has ever been in before.
I come from regular stock.
That's never been in before.
Oh, that's new. Yeah.
Yeah. And isn't there a Grady drop that's in there this year too?
Yes, I believe.
I think it's
situation. Yeah.
What he's got going here is a situation.
That's one of my favorites. I love it.
Yeah. So, and I'll tell you another one that's never been in before that's going to be in this year.
There's always been in this country 30 to 35% idiots.
That's pretty good. That's Jim Avila, and that will be in. So I like the mix that you've done this year, Kamish.
Yes,
so,
and I do. I have a personal favorite that I want to go far. It's probably the "Are you a member of the Chinese Communist Party?"
I love that drop.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
I just love that drop. It sounds like it's out of a movie. That's Josh Hawley. I mean, that's that's a.
Have you ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party?
Oh, I love that drop too.
What about George Santos? Those are some good drops.
Oh yeah, Santos is in.
Hey Mark, it's George Santos here.
Right, that drop is in also.
Yeah, debut in the tournament, only in 19 seeds. So that's a pretty cool drop. Especially George Santos is very hot in the news. So maybe.
What was the second seed, Albert? What is the second seed, please?
Second seed is Where My Weed Smokers. So the top four seeds were our top four last year. So we'll see if they'll be supplanted.
Supplanted. That's a ding word. Supplanted. And
where are my weed smokers at?
Yeah, that's good.
Rounded up by Why You Yelling, which is also a former champion. And
Why
then
You Yelling?
And Oprah What? Those are our top.
Oh, Oprah What is very strong. Yes.
I pound that What like 5-6 times minimum a day. So
it's pretty great. Well, you've been really rocking it, and we love that you're rocking it from Asia. How about it for the commissioner of Mark's Madness, which begins Wednesday of next week? Albert, everybody. Yeah, it's very, very cool. I'm excited. It always produces some surprises. And
I'm impressed with all the work he's done on this. This is not easy,
Well, it's also not typical of Albert to do all that work.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I kid. All right, Albert, let's get poised to give me some Law and Disorder. And it includes some funky stuff. So let's get funky. And this is Law and Disorder.
In the criminal justice system, the people,
pimps, addicts, thieves, bums, winos, girls who can't keep an address, and men who don't care,
are represented by two separate yet equally important groups.
A cop, a flatfoot, a bull, a dick, John Law. You're the fuzz, the heat, you're poison, you're trouble, you're bad news.
These are their stories.
It is true. There was a verdict, and it did not take the jury long to find the Rust armorer guilty of involuntary manslaughter in that criminal shooting case involving the death, as you know, of Hutchins. What was her first name? Was
Helena.
Helena, thank you. Yeah. So sad.
Yeah.
But it was a split verdict, 12-member jury in Santa Fe, New Mexico, didn't convict her on evidence tampering charges. Jurors returned after less than 3 hours of deliberating, I think, as I may have mentioned. She, I believe her name is Gutierrez, right? Hannah Gutierrez Reed.
Right.
She's been found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, again, in the accidental shooting death of the cinematographer Helena Hutchins, right? Yeah,
Hutchins.
Helena Hutchins. The top prison term she can receive is 18 months. It happened.
What was she found guilty of? It was involuntary manslaughter?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's remanded into custody. You see a picture of her being remanded into custody now after the verdict was read.
They said she's responsible for bringing the live rounds onto the set.
Yeah.
There were only supposed to be rounds that were ineffective, that didn't work, that were fake, whatever. And, why there were actually live rounds on the set of that movie, that's what she's blamed for.
Yeah. During the trial, prosecutors were underscoring the fact that Gutierrez-Reed, who said that she believed she loaded Baldwin's gun with dummy rounds, was careless in handling the firearms and ammunition on the set of this entire film the entire time. In other words, as Kim has sort of noted, there shouldn't have been live ammo on the set to begin with. Apparently,
right.
the set and the firearms were involved in all kinds of, in other words, target shooting and a bunch of other crap that was going on. It shouldn't have been going on. And all of that was introduced as evidence.
But does she seem like kind of a scapegoat in this whole thing?
Oh, I'm sure there is an aspect of this that could be attributed to scapegoatism in that, as we explained and detailed, these are lower budget films, and to cut corners, they literally don't have a bunch of safety precautions built in with personnel and multiple layers of personnel that they might in a bigger budget film. That said, there should be no live ammunition on this set. There is no need for it. And so both can be true, that it is low budget and should have been handled more responsibly, maybe with multiple layers, but also she is only on that set to handle the weapons. That's what the armorer does. And so her negligence, in effect, I think makes her on some level culpable, Now, Alec Baldwin is going to be involved in this case, too. He'll be charged and recharged with involuntary manslaughter. He was recharged already, but now he'll actually go through a trial. It'll happen in July. He's pleaded not guilty. He faces 18 months in prison if convicted. So you have to ask yourself, does the actor on the set, regardless of what he's been told, regardless of whether he's been told this is a cold weapon, it's not loaded or whatever, does that actor have some responsibility to double check the weapon? So I think that's what this is going to come down to.
I don't think so. Because, say I'm the actor on the set. I have no idea. I've never held a gun before. I wouldn't know what a live round versus a fake round even looked like. So how can you put a non-expert in charge of such things? That's why they hire an armorer. That's why there's an expert on the set, right?
There is more to it than that, and that is associated with what Baldwin said to cops. Because in this testimony, the Baldwin remarks were invoked to make a point. Baldwin, this is a quote, has vehemently said that he was handed the gun by this woman who was just Halls, who was just Gutierrez Halls, who was just, Halls is the director. Is that, maybe I've got the names wrong. Gutierrez-Reed is who was just convicted.
The armorer, right.
Yeah. Halls is because I saw testimony from Halls that was sort of damning toward, take a look. Albert, maybe you can find it. But I...
Google it.
Okay. The Baldwin has vehemently said that he was handed the gun. And maybe Halls is the attorney. Sorry about that. Yeah, Halls is the attorney. Baldwin has vehemently said that he was handed the gun by Halls. No, okay. Find out who Halls is. Damn it! I'm
on it. Yeah.
Okay, my God, I just.
Wait, that really tripped you up.
I didn't think that it would become this. I'd be caught up in the weeds. What I'm trying to get to is that Baldwin could be shown to have lied to the cops about who gave him the gun. The director, right?
Assistant director.
Assistant director, okay. Mm-hmm. So Baldwin has said that he was handed the gun by the assistant director. And the assistant director said what? No, that woman, Gutierrez-Reed, who was just found guilty, she handed the gun to Baldwin. So it would mean that Baldwin lied. Now, he could have misremembered. You can make your own excuses up. But no producer outside of Alec Baldwin, remember he's a producer on this project, was charged over this accidental shooting. So last year, these producers settled a citation from a New Mexico safety agency for a lot of violations for safety protocols. And they negotiated a reduced penalty of $100,000. Anyway, this is a big story, and I think it also kicks open the door for Baldwin to be found guilty as well. That is something I'm going to ask David Katz about. Mm-hmm. Now, to what I think is a sign of the times. In New York, the National Guard and state police will patrol the subways and they'll check bags.
What?
Yeah. The governor of the state of New York, amid a series of violent crimes on the subway, said she's going to deploy 1,000 members of the state police and National Guard to the transit system in New York. The transit system is operated by the Metropolitan Transit Authority. It's a state agency. And the governor has said, Kathy Hochul has said, we need commuters to feel safe. I mean, this is a sophisticated, maybe one of the most sophisticated transit systems in the country. But, you know, you've got a city in New York that's got a rebound from the pandemic, and they've got people coming back to work and now crowding onto these subway cars, and they have to feel safe. So the idea is there's a large police presence already in the subways, but now you would have additional law enforcement in those subways. There has been a 45% spike in major crimes in January compared with the same time last year.
But this is random bag checks. I mean, anybody could be on the subway and they could walk up to you and say, ma'am, can I see what's in your purse? I mean,
what?
Isn't that what's going on here?
Well, not anyone can do that. They have to be National Guard and state police.
Yeah, but they could walk up to anyone and say, show me what you got.
Yeah, they can check bags for weapons. Yes, that's right. And you're saying that is almost like a stop and frisk thing? You have a problem with that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, on one hand, I want there to be safety for people. Maybe they should do a bag check for everyone on the way in, like an NFL game.
They can't do that because of the obvious slowing down of the process of people getting on the trains. You know?
Then it becomes someone like me. You're not going to look in my bag. But, you know, someone of color, then all of a sudden it's show me everything.
Well,
open up your backpack. I need to see inside.
I could see
and
that.
then
You just don't get it, do you?
And then, exactly.
Yeah.
You've got a stop and frisk situation.
Maybe I don't. I mean, I think if rip-offs are up 45%, I think you've got to do something. And I think a show of, well, you know how I feel. I'd have cops everywhere if I could. There are just not enough cops for all the cops I'd have everywhere. It's out of control. This is out of control. In San Francisco, in Los Angeles, but San Francisco is any of these dense urban areas. New York, of course, is really dense. You've got a serious problem.
So when you see the crime, arrest the person and actually prosecute the person, right?
I think that should be part of it as well.
But this whole, open your bag randomly, it seems kind of like train station in 1942, show me your papers kind of situation.
Well, by the way, you can refuse the baggage check. I mean, they allow you to say no, but they just don't let you on then. That's the thing. And it's unclear how long this will last. I'm not saying it's a perfect system, and maybe it's not even the best system, but they need to do something. What would be your suggestion?
Arrest people that you see doing crimes, actually
you don't see them doing crimes if you don't have cops there.
Well, you've got cameras all over the trains.
Cameras, they need to be monitored by someone.
Well,
don't have cameras all over the train.
If you have all these National Guards being deployed, then put them on the trains to watch for things like security guards.
Well, they're going to have a presence as people get on the trains, but they are, and they're going to be, I'm guessing they're going to be randomized bag checks. They're not going to be associated with profiling. That's my guess. I mean, it's the only way really constitutionally they can do it. So I'm sorry. You know where I am about law and disorder and law and order. And I just feel as though we've got a lot of disorder and not a lot of order. And
I mean, nobody wants crime, but there's a step over the line when it comes to no crime, but also protecting our freedoms. And I don't know that random bag checks are really the way to protect freedom and protect against crime.
Well, I mean, I'm open to suggestions. You're saying let's wait for the crime to happen and then you arrest him. That's what they're doing now. It's not working. It's up 45%. Would you get on the subway?
And
would
absolutely
you?
Not. No.
Would you bring your? Well, then, I mean, come on.
No.
I mean, you've got a, as I've suggested, a sophisticated transportation system that needs a fix. People are not safe. What do? You flood the zone with people who are in a position to discourage criminals. And I think that presence will do it.
What's going to happen when the National Guard troops leave? Are people right back to where they were?
We'll find out. Let me,
Kim, how are you?
Let me leave this this law and disorder with a little bit of a palate cleanser, which involves SEX.
What?
Hello.
A married Sussex police officer left his force radio on, I guess, police radio, after sneaking off for SEX with a colleague. He was kind of into it. Inspector Darren Lane put his radio on her bedside table. He's a married police inspector, and he had sex with a female colleague while on duty. He's accused of sneaking off to have what they called full sex with her.
Yeah.
Placing the radio.
Opposed to partial sex?
Yes, it's really ordering off the menu, apparently.
No touch of sex. This is a full
yes, I'd like
Monty.
the full sex, please.
Smashed it with your iron rod.
The hearing heard that, this is a disciplinary hearing, as you might imagine, that after leaving her house, he sent a message which read, "That's the baddest thing I've ever done, XXX. He also sent her explicit pictures of his anatomy and a video of himself performing a sex act. Well, he's really going in for
the image is hideous.
Yeah, the image is hideous. This, by the way, Sussex, I believe, is in England, isn't it? So
yes.
Yes. But I certainly hope that degree of horniness makes its way over to the U.S. if it hasn't already. That, my friends, is Law and Disorder.
Tune in again next time for more Law and Disorder on The Mark Thompson Show.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
Albert, remind me, if you would please, to ask David Katz about what Kim was talking about,
Albert,
which is
you.
the idea that you're stopping randomly for bag checks people are getting on the subway in New York. You know what I mean? I think it's a decent legal question. And so I'd like to...
I'll put it in the rundown.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Kim's News, which I'm a big fan of. And then we continue. David Katz to come. He's the brilliant legal mind, former federal prosecutor. And then I want to touch on the exit polling in the Donald Trump Nikki Haley primary, which doesn't look like it's right. It was a cakewalk for Trump. But what was revealed in this exit polling is profound and really may have an effect on the coming election. And I get it. Two old white guys, they're both about the same age. I know they make a big thing about Biden. They've sold that. But Trump is, 3 years younger. What's the big deal? Anyway, the exit polling is bad news for Donald Trump. And we'll get to that as we continue. Smash the like button, and Kim's News next. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, on the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by Coachella Valley Coffee and Tea, CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. As Mark mentioned earlier here on the Big Mark Thompson Show, Sweden officially joining NATO today after Russia's invasion of Ukraine made Sweden rethink its defense policy and abandon its long-held position of neutrality. Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson formally handing over accession documents to the United States Department in Washington, D.C. And that is the final step in the process to gain the approval of all members to allow Sweden to become the alliance's 32nd member. So welcome, Sweden. A lot of comments about Sweden on the Mark Thompson Show today.
What are the comments?
Donald the Maine Coon. Oh, he's in Guatemala, by the way.
Wow.
Look at that.
Bueno. Hola.
The architecture is gorgeous, but the air pollution is horrendous. Too many motorcycles.
That's what happens when you don't have any regulation on discharge like that.
Murphy writes something Swedish.
Välkommen till NATO. I go, Välkommen is welcome, right?
Yeah.
To NATO. Very cool.
Welcome
Impressive
to Sweden.
knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, friends from Florida. Good news about Sweden, says Linda 47 Allen. Yeah.
So there you go. A lot of people happy to welcome them.
Well, we got the Swedish on board.
That's right.
You'll notice, and I'll just remind you, that the entire thing happened quickly after what? What major world event prompted this?
Well, yeah, of course. It was the Ukraine, right?
Exactly,
and Russia.
Ukraine.
Yeah.
So when Russia invaded Ukraine, Sweden, desperate to join NATO. And it is something of a strategic blow to the Russian interest.
Well, it's a little scary when you got Russian coming toward you.
Right.
Hello.
They're now saying that the Russian government is that they're going to take defensive measures to further enhance their own defense against this expanding NATO. So,
well, now they have the backing of NATO behind them, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's a little bit more safe. Let's talk about the State of the Union address that is happening tonight. President Biden expected to announce a U.S. mission to deliver aid to Gaza in his State of the Union speech, the president ordering a port to be built on the Gaza coast in a mission led by the U.S. military. Announcing this port is in response to pressure on the president to help Palestinian civilians caught in the crossfire of the Israel-Hamas war. Meanwhile, labor unions and women's health are part of the theme of First Lady Dr. Jill Biden's State of the Union guest list tonight. Here she is, Dr. Jill Biden. Guests include for her women's health activist Maria Shriver and an Alabama woman who had her embryo transfer canceled after the state's recent Supreme Court decision. Also on the guest list, United Auto Workers President Shawn Fain will be there as well.
Wow.
Lawmakers are hoping to highlight issues important to California at President Biden's State of the Union speech as well. We will see Congressman Adam Schiff there, fresh off his victory in the Senate race on Tuesday here in California. His guest will be the president of the United Farm Workers, which is the nation's largest and oldest agricultural labor union. Congressman Schiff says it's important to remind people farm workers are the ones who put food on our tables. Other guests from our state include a labor leader, a school superintendent, and also they'll have an AI expert. So that'll be interesting. I guess there's a lot of tech talk that will be in the speech tonight.
It's
right?
always the case that during State of the Union addresses, there is a stocked house, right?
Sure.
People who are there to make a point, either symbolic reasons or because they're going to be integrated, some reference to them to the president's speech. So all of these various things, they happen with every president, but it is a clue as to the way the speech will likely go. Oh, I don't know where Kim is, but did I lose it? I lose Kim?
Just unmuted her.
Did you? Okay. I'm sorry, I was muted. So it's also interesting, I think, you can kind of get some hints about what's going to be in the speech by the people they invite. Right. So we know now what the likely topics will be, just given who's coming. So that's.
I think I just said that, Kim. I mean, that's exactly what I said, Kim.
Why are you yelling?
I said it's symbolic, but it's likely indicated in reflection of what he could actually do.
They do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
Well, isn't that interesting? In Irvine, Congresswoman Katie Porter is suggesting that billionaires rigged the California U.S. Senate race in favor of her rival, Adam Schiff.
What?
Well, she's not wrong in a way. Go ahead.
Porter, who did not win a single county in Tuesday's primary election, made the accusation yesterday on a post on X. Porter says her campaign was up against 3-1 in TV spending and an onslaught of billionaires spending millions to rig this election. She also suggests special interests had an influence on the election. Porter had less than 14% of the vote, losing to fellow Democrat Schiff and Republican Steve Garvey, who will face each other in the general election in November.
I mean, the use of all of that Schiff money to push Garvey over the top, make him number 2 or number 1, doesn't matter. It didn't matter whether he was number 1 or number 2. That was the result of a lot of money. I mean, you know, she's not wrong completely at all. Anyway.
I guess I have a problem with the word rigged.
Yeah.
I don't, I mean, that's smacks of Trumpism.
Well, I'll tell you something else. I think Kim makes a good point here that it does suggest unfair play. Mm-hmm. And now, again, I will say she's not completely wrong in the fact that it was unfair, but it's not illegal, meaning it's effed up that the 3D chess of politics allows you to throw money at Steve Garvey in this case. Yeah. And that boosts Garvey into a position that eclipses Katie Porter. But that move of throwing money at Steve Garvey, which is what the Schiff campaign essentially did with ads, etc., that's legal. Again, it's unfair. Like it's not like you're just out there with your positions versus the other person's positions and you'll win in the court of public discourse. So that way she's kind of right, but it's not rigged. I think you're right, Kim. Rigged is a loaded word. She's still muted, Albert. I guess she mutes herself every time I speak.
No, I had to cough. I have a cough. I like that, what you just said. I think you're right, Kim. I'd like that to be a drop.
Yeah, it should be a drop because you're not going to hear it much, I don't think.
Yeah.
I'll mute her again, Mark.
Hey! 2 against 1.
Albert, thank you.
This kind of reminds me of January 6th, right? But security fencing is in place around the U.S. Capitol ahead of the address tonight. This 12-foot tall fence erected by workers last night, it's the 4th year in a row the security measure has been taken following the January 6th riot. So we're back to barbed wire and fencing at our Capitol. Here in California, they are still counting the ballots, but election workers again, are still at it, but some races too close to call, and that includes Proposition 1. At last check, voters seem to be evenly divided on the state measure aimed at tackling the homelessness crisis. It would allow a $6 billion bond to be used for building mental health treatment and housing facilities for those people living on the street. Several counties will release updated results today or tomorrow. The Secretary of State is required to certify this 38 days after the election. So the count goes on and we don't know about Prop 1, which is interesting. That's how close it is. In Texas, guess what caused that largest fire in the state? Power pole. And now the power company, Xcel Energy, is admitting, it looks like our equipment was involved in this. We've seen it in California. Now we've got it in Texas. The utility providing power to the Texas Panhandle, investigating whether their equipment may be the source of what has become the largest wildfire in Texas state history. Already several lawsuits filed over the Smokehouse Creek fire that point to a downed power line. In a statement, Xcel Energy says it does appear its facilities were involved in the ignition of this fire. I don't know what it takes for these energy companies to shore things up and get things, so that it doesn't happen, or whether it's just something that's going to happen and we just have to be prepared for it. I don't know.
I mean, what they've done is, in other states, just as we've done in California, they've allowed these power companies to erect the most cost-effective way to get people power. That is above ground lines to put all these lines in the ground would be prohibitively expensive, is the thinking.
Yeah.
But what that's done is exposed the entire state, just as it has in California, to the possible eventuality of one of these things being blown down and igniting a fire. And that we've seen it over and over here. And now, of course, here in California, we've done this thing where we turn the power off. When I say we, I mean the power company does. They'll say, hey, we're going to have a power interruption, which has its own issues. And there are people on, literal medical devices that are shut down during these electrical interruptions. Some of these interruptions go on for a couple of days. So it's really a contemporary issue, not only in California, but in Texas. I'll remind you one other thing in Texas. They do not have the kind of regulatory structure on their electric companies that we have in California. So I know everybody hates the burdensome regulations, but the reality is those safeguards, I mean, you call them regulations, but they are safeguards. Those are the only thing between the public and a lot of these catastrophic disasters happening.
Crazy. Big to-do on Wall Street today. It looks good if you have NVIDIA stock, look at you go.
It's been a good couple of months, probably, yeah.
Investors are riding a tech wave today. The S&P 500 has hit an all-time high. Dow Jones Industrial Average and the NASDAQ also up in midday trading. The AI company NVIDIA is leading the surge today. So, in Alabama, they're kind of trying to do a little backtrack and, safe. Alabama healthcare facilities and professionals that perform in vitro fertilization will receive immunity from criminal prosecution. Republican Governor Kay Ivey signing a bill yesterday, right after it was approved by the state legislature. Civil lawsuits, though, will still be allowed against the manufacturers of IVF products used to grow embryos. So they're trying to fix it. They're trying to make it legal again to perform in vitro in Alabama, but they're having all kinds of questions still. Does this bill go far enough? So we've talked before about the Hotel California situation, right?
Yeah, we had a big conversation. In fact, David Katz did a big drill down on it.
Well, and I have a picture of the napkin in question where they all of this was written on.
It's the lyrics of Hotel California was this case.
Yeah, this is all about the lyrics of Hotel California. I'm looking for the picture. Here it is. Okay, so there's some, I guess, some movement in this legal case. Here it is. There you can see the napkin where the lyrics were written, and the three defendants accused of stealing it and trying to resell this at a collection of Hotel California lyrics. They're finding out that maybe it's not going to work out for them. Prosecutors dropping all charges against Glenn Horowitz, Edward Kaczynski, and former Rock and Roll Hall of Fame curator Craig Inchardi after Eagles co-founder Don Henley submitted 6,000 pages of correspondence well into the trial. The handwritten lyrics from the Eagles' 1976 smash album were valued at more than $1 million. So, again, prosecutors dropping charges in this case today. Yeah.
Pretty wild. I mean, I'll ask Katz about this because, as I say, he's been very much up on this case. One of the reasons he's up on it is because it's a big deal in New York, which is where this case is going down. And David does a lot of stuff for Fox 5 in New York. So he does a lot of legal analysis for them, So, okay, we'll ask him about it. Albert, will you make a note of that, please? No.
Noted.
Albert, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Albert's making a lot of notes today. That's what we can take away from this newscast. Lastly, I will tell you that we have this little creature in California and elsewhere, and it's called the burrowing owl. And the burrowing owl is at risk. Here's a little picture of the burrowing owl. And so now, he's so cute. The California Fish and Game Commission is being called on to protect the western burrowing owl. Environmental advocates sending a petition to give the animals endangered status in the southwestern part of the state. They say these burrowing owls have been disappearing here over the last 2 decades. And why? Urban development, large solar and wind products. So humans, right? They stress the direct intervention is needed now to boost the population of the burrowing owl species. They're the only owl that nests underground, which is interesting.
Wow, that is interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
They're very cute. Hopefully they get their
Kim, how are
endangered
you?
status.
I'd love a biologist to come out with and one of the things that we're so impressed with is that they nest underground. We've also noticed that they're so cute.
They're very cute. I mean, come on, look at that little owl face.
They
It's
are.
adorable.
You're absolutely right. I love it.
Emil Schaffhausen.
Yes, Dr. Emil Schaffhausen III is involved in the preservation of these beautiful things.
They're really tiny, too. They're very small owls. So, adorable.
Right now it's mating season, and they're hungry.
Oh, there's that. That's true.
This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Making the coffee that you want in your coffee cup, in your Mark Thompson Show coffee cup. Yeah, and they're making it good. They're also making the tea that you want in your tea cup, your Mark Thompson Show tea cup. Check it out at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And when, as you inevitably will do, you get a little shopping cart filled up with all the good things that you want delivered to your house, make sure that you enter the code MARKT. All together, Mark T at checkout gives you an exclusive 10% off. There you go, Mark T. Perfect.
Bravo.
You see that 10% fly right off your total.
Ding, 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 ding.
There it is.
Yeah.
So CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, our thanks to them for sponsoring the news on the Mark Thompson Show, and our thanks to you for supporting them as well. I'm Kim McAllister. This is the Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now, he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson.
Smash it with your iron rod.
I come from regular stock.
There's a reason that this place is fun. Don't ever use that word.
What are the porn stars doing, Mark?
They pay me a lot of money for having attitude.
What you say is the political dogma that they're trying to shove down our throats.
Straight up, right in, no problem.
What the hell is going on in the United States of America?
Cuatro años más.
I don't wear a mask for the same reason I don't wear underwear. Things gotta breathe.
Say what?
Do you have a secret talent?
You get nothing.
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
Did you really just do that?
Yeah, right on, everybody. Oh, by the way, the first virtual meetup of 2024 with special guests. In fact, I have so many guests, I got to figure out how to land all these planes. Next Thursday, a week from tonight, on the West Coast, these are West Coast times, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. It'll be a 2-hour hangout. 20-person limit. I still have, I think, 3 spots left.
Ooh.
You sign up at our PayPal. You go to our PayPal, which is, there's a link to the PayPal beneath this video on YouTube, below most all our videos have the link to PayPal. You go there, a $50 donation, because it's a fundraiser for the show, will lock you up a spot. And when you do it, just note meet and greet or meet up or, meet, something like that, with your donation, and you are locked to go. Now, I will send everybody a link to this Zoom this weekend. So everybody who has already signed up, you should get it by Monday. If you haven't, that'll give us some days to make sure that you do get it. RSVP if you want to mtsmeetup@gmail after you have done your thing on PayPal. But I'm really looking forward to it. We have Jim Avila, Josh Mankiewicz from Dateline said he's going to try to be there. I've got Michael Schor, Michael Snyder, Jefferson Graham, Kim, Albert from Taiwan. It's going to be, I think, a really great event. I'm looking forward to it.
There's never been anything like this.
Well, there has actually been something like it. It was like the one last year. Well, it's been a while, for sure. So, anyway, that's happening on Thursday of next week, 1 week from tonight. Sign up, and we're really looking forward to hanging out with everybody. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Let me quickly touch on this. Donald Trump taking a victory lap, of course, after the trouncing he gave Nikki Haley. But Nikki Haley, if you're not a Trump fan, might have done a great favor for you. In exit polling, there is a significant group of Haley voters saying that Donald Trump is not physically or mentally fit to be president.
What?
I know it's a surprise. 66% of those voting for Nikki Haley in exit polling said that they felt that Trump is not physically or mentally fit to be president. That's significant.
That means they won't switch their votes over to him, right?
Exactly. Or you would think the lion's share will either not vote at all, or they certainly will not vote for Trump.
Right.
A vast majority, to Kim's point, 81%, say they are not automatic votes for Donald Trump, even though he won the primary in which they had voted for Haley. According to ABC News in Virginia, the plurality of Haley voters said that they approved of the job that Joe Biden was doing as president. In North Carolina, the number of people, again in exit polling done by ABC, that said that they approved of the job that Joe Biden was doing as president, that number was 50%. These are of the Haley voters. So what you begin to realize is that the Haley voters have more in common with the Joe Biden presidency than they do with the Donald Trump presidency. And it's clear, and you can already see it, the way Trump is trying to pivot and play to some of them. He's lowered the flame on some of his rhetoric. If you can get those Haley voters, enough of them, that could propel you to the presidency. Remember, the whole thing comes down to 40,000 votes, 10,000 here, 10,000 there. Biden literally won the presidency by 45,000 votes.
Oh, every vote matters. It's going to make a big difference.
Particularly in swing states. And according to ABC News, 76% of Haley voters oppose a what? Oppose a federal abortion ban.
Yep.
It is very hard for Donald Trump to swim away from the fact that he gave you the Supreme Court that is hard right, hard religious right, and is taking away a woman's reproductive choice. 60% support a chance for most undocumented immigrants to apply for legal status. 59% of Donald Trump's voters say that they are angry about the way things are going in this country. 21% of Haley voters feel that way. So you see in the Haley voter exit polling a lot of opportunity for the Democrats to gain ground and keep Joe Biden in office. It's all now about messaging, I would say. And, you know, if you're a Haley voter and you hear Donald Trump call her a bird brain and kind of, you know, flamethrow at her, you may feel insulted by that. I think rightfully so. I mean, it just doesn't, you know, that's kind of his brand, but it's a crappy brand.
Yeah.
You know, you're an S-bag and that's your brand, that you call people names and that you talk smack to them. I mean, he really is pursuing the kind of rhetoric on the stump that is like WWE stuff. So, again, exit polling revelations, I think. When you see the number of Haley voters that oppose the federal abortion ban, you see the number of Haley voters that say that Donald Trump is not physically or mentally fit to be president. 66% of them say that. And then 81% say we're not an automatic vote for Trump at all. That, I think, is significant.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Smash the like button like a boss if you would. I wanted to get to a couple of comments before David Katz gets here. The great legal mind, former federal prosecutor David Katz on his way. On the Texas electric grid, BB says that the Texas grid is off the federal grid system. That's true. They self-regulate. Yeah, that was a point I was making about sort of the regulation, but you make a broader point, which is that, they're their own world down there. That's how they ended up with all the lights and the heat going off, and Ted Cruz went to Mexico, right? I mean, that was the situation that allowed that to happen because they didn't have a cooperative agreement with with any other state.
It was obviously a mistake, and in hindsight, I wouldn't have done it.
All right, okay. Well, there you got the, let's...
Hey, look, we don't have school. Let's get out of here.
It's cold here. Let's leave the dog behind.
Wait, I don't think we can talk about Texas with, I'm going back to hell, you're going back to Texas.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
Randy says, the regulations in California have prevented catastrophic fires. Of course, he's being sarcastic. What I'm suggesting is, of course, this is why there is a... Kim had made the point that we know the situation in Texas from our own situations in California. I was simply making the point that our regulations exist. They certainly have not been sufficient to address this issue with these catastrophic fires produced by downed power lines, but they are more stringent than Texas. That's all I was trying to say. The issue on the electricity, Louis says the issue is that I have is with the PUC that let PG&E do what they want. I couldn't agree more. It's a mobbed up scene, and the PUC. You guys have, I believe you have. Don't you have Loretta Lynch on Nikki's show? Do you still have?
Yeah, often. Yeah.
And she was a former PUC
president.
President. So and she'll tell you that. She'll tell you it's mobbed up, won't she?
Yeah.
I mean, she's got that to say. And a super sticker finally from Lucy. Big shout out, Lucy.
Big shout out
for a couple of bucks today.
Lucy McAllister. She's a McAllister, although she has one less C than I do. She's McAl. I'm McCal. But that's cool. We like that.
Do you feel superior to her? Is that what you're saying?
No, I mean, I think we're all of the same stock.
Very, very good. Good answer, by the way, I would say that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at Scottish ancestry, they say, here's the, they list all the different spellings of McAllister. And some are McAllister. And we're all from the same. So, however you spell it.
That's oftentimes what happens, right? They just change the spelling and, while I wait for David Katz, I want to let you know that there was a big case. Investors in Lyft suing for securities fraud. Here's what happened. It's wild. In fact, it's so wild that I'll...
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'll detail what their excuse was. Sorry, that was a mistake on my hand just rested on the wrong place.
We take a lot of applause here. It's okay.
Yeah. Lyft and its boss sued by investors for securities fraud. A typo in the earnings report exaggerated profits and caused the stock to jump 67%.
What?
Oopsies.
The mistake overstated by a factor of 10 how much faster profits will rise. That caused the share price to skyrocket. But then after the mistake was admitted, it fell. So the lawsuit is saying, hey, we were damaged by this ride up and drop. And those of us who bought Lyft at the inflated share price, we want money back. I mean, there are demonstrable damages here. So it all happened between 4:05 p.m. and 4:51 p.m. And now they're saying, hey, in less than an hour, we lost a ton of money. That 67% jump hurt us. All because a decimal point was put in the wrong place. So the damages are demonstrable, it would seem. And they're asking for those damages to be paid by Lyft. The lawsuit seeks damages for investors who bought Lyft shares at the inflated prices During that period, Lyft's market value rose as much as $3.2 billion. And then when they realized it, they moved the decimal point back. They dropped in market value to 2.9 billion of that increase. All right. So it dropped off 2.9 billion. Shareholders also said that they were motivated, Lyft was, to delay fixing the mistake because they were boosting their stock.
Well, of course.
Because their bonuses are linked to how well the stock does.
Don't fix it right away.
Exactly.
We know there was a mistake. Did somebody get fired for this?
Well, it's they're now suing in U.S. District Court in the Northern District of California.
Yeah.
But I believe the two guys who are named in the suit in the sort of C-suite of Lyft, I don't know if they've been fired, but I would certainly say that they have some explaining to do. So,
I mean, come on. You had one job, prepare the stock documents, right?
Or review the stock documents.
Right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I love Thursdays for talking to this guy, the former federal prosecutor. I mentioned that you can hear him across British media, across national media here on Fox News Channel, Fox 5 in New York. He was commenting, and I want to ask him about this Don Henley case because there was a resolution in that case involving the Hotel California lyrics. We talk a lot about Donald Trump and Constitution. We talk a lot about the impeachment. We talked a lot about now what will be center stage, I think, this immunity that the Supreme Court has decided to wade in on. He now works the defense side of the table from being a federal prosecutor. He's the wonderful David Katz, everybody.
Great to be with you, Mark, Kim.
Yeah, and there is a picture of David Katz. Albert, can we share the picture of David Katz? And this is you, and who's that guy on the left with you?
That's our next senator, Adam Schiff.
What?
Terrific guy that I know from the U.S. Attorney's Office back in 1988.
You guys were colleagues.
We sure were.
Connected to him.
We sure were. And like I said, he's really terrific. You know, he's been put through the mill by the Trumpsters and by a lot of people who've mischaracterized him and his positions. But he's really an honest guy. When people talk about, wow, there ought to be people in government like that, he's one of the people in government like that. Honest, devoted to, what the people want, to democracy. And he's not as, I guess, middle of the road, as people say. He tells this great story where he meets Republicans in Congress, and they say, you know what? You really are just as liberal as the other ones. You just have a much nicer way. You just have a much nicer way about you. And he does have a very nice way about him. And I know that you had his rival on last week, Garvey, as your commish said, 294 lifetime batting average. But I think you can be pretty sure that Adam Schiff is going to bat 1,000 on this one because the state's more than 2-1 registered Democratic. And he's got a lot, some people are going to go to the polls and say, well, I like Trump and he put on the first impeachment trial in the Senate against Trump. Everyone said at the time that he did a consummate professional job. Even the Republican senators said it was a great presentation. And don't you want somebody who makes a great presentation on behalf of California? Even if you have differences of opinion with him about the Trump impeachment, or maybe you don't think that he's far left enough, he makes a great presentation for California. And I really think he'll be a great senator. And that's my electioneering. But you did have Garvey on, so that's a
Absolutely.
little.
And maybe we tried to have Schiff on. We put the call out to Schiff, and we heard nothing from their office. And I don't necessarily blame him. I know he's very busy, and he also, may not feel as though we're a powerful enough outlet. But
well, keep trying, because he was on with Pat Thurston all the time. Kim will remember, that show. I'm sure yours did it too. But Pat, she had Schiff on one day and Pelosi on another, and that was like Tuesday and Thursday for her. So
I think it's an interesting thing about legacy media, because I'll just touch on this and then we can move on. KGO had a great footprint and a great reputation, and so I think maybe they hear the KGO name, they see the KGO brand, and sort of its legacy brand is very powerful, and they spark to it. When you hear, YouTube or whatever, you may not spark to it, even though, and I really want to make this point, some of these videos we're dropping are getting hundreds of thousands of views. That's way more than the best day at KGO would ever get you. So if you're trying to reach people and you're trying to reach activated voters, this audience on this show is that. So I would say in the new world, this isn't a bad show to do. So we will try for him again. But I think I do want to say, because I said...
Mark, let me say this. If you're on for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you have an audience that listens to you for 5 or 10 minutes. KGO on the radio, people flip the dial and there's an ad on the other station. They listen for 30 seconds. They went back to the old. You remember that on the radios where you just jump around from one station to the other. You like this song, you drop the next one because of the ad. So I think people really pay attention to what's on your show. And so I think that would behoove Adam, to be on your show. But you're right. He has a huge amount of media exposure now because the New York Times is so interested. And, this seat that Dianne Feinstein had for 30 years, it's one of the big Senate seats. It's one of the, the really interesting thing that's going to happen. And of course, in the fall, the voters are going to come out en masse in California to vote Democratic, to vote for Biden, and to not vote for Trump. And that will have a huge spillover. I think that Garvey hit his high point with a March primary that tends to bring out more conservative voters. I also think someone like Hochman in the DA's race, I think he may have hit his high point because the Gascon voters, I think, are much more likely to come out in November than they were in March.
I think I would agree with both those points. Behoove is a ding word. Maybe David can greenlight Mark's show to shift people. Yeah, well, you can say something. Murphy says, yeah, you can say something if you talk to them. But we'll stay on it, and maybe it'll come back around. But the other thing I would say, because I said it on the air before, and I'll mention it again in regard to Adam Schiff, he's a very courageous guy. Not only did he put together a cogent, terrific argument in the impeachment proceeding, but as you say, he worked against these awful headwinds that were really blowing against him politically and personally. I give him a lot of credit. He's a courageous guy in the face of a Washington establishment now that has no civility left. So I give him a lot of credit for that. I want to.
He was censored. He was censored by the Republicans when they took over the House, and he wears it as a badge of honor because he served so well on the Intelligence Committee. And of course, they should have kept him on the Intelligence Committee. And that was nothing but payback. And I'll say something else too. The Democrats, when they were on the Intelligence Committee, always kept secrets. They kept secrets for Trump. They kept secrets for the Republican administrations. They did exactly what their duty required them to do. And now you hear somebody who's on the Republican Intelligence Committee and he's running his mouth and he's kind of saying things that are a little bit provocative. And, they used to call them the Nerd Caucus because these guys just, followed the law and they did things the way they were supposed to do them. And I think it's great. Some people say, well, they want somebody more charismatic. Let me tell you, Adam Schiff's just charismatic enough for me because you want someone who plays by the rules. And if, God forbid, Trump gets back in there, can you think of a better senator to have, in there,
to push back on him,
knowing how to prosecute if Trump is back in there?
I'm seeing that somebody said, oh, David's when he endorses Schiff, he loses credibility. I don't think that's true. David's allowed to have an opinion on things, and you've been incredibly even-handed, even with Trump. I mean, you've actually suggested, as we look at these various cases involving Donald Trump, you suggested, well, I don't think they have a case against Trump here. I think, and in that same kind of even-handed head that endorses Schiff, I give you a lot of credit. That means something to me. You're allowed to have an opinion here.
If I can tell you one story from back in the 80s, he didn't win his first race. So I had just left the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I don't know, there were 10 or 12 of us who were backing his campaign. It was on the West Side. It wasn't in that Burbank area that he ended up doing so well in. He was then living on the West Side. He ran on the West Side. I don't know, there were 12 or 14 of us. And I've been there when your candidate of choice doesn't win. And we had enough champagne for a small army. And first we tried to drink it. Then we cried in it. And so, of course, as an old friend, I not only have a right to have an opinion, I have a right to have emotions. But I go back with some of the other ones, too. Ali Mayorkas and I've got some good Mayorkas stories if we ever want to talk about them. He was already the U.S. attorney, but he gave my client a huge break. I had what I think was the first Dreamer. And there was a show on local TV station called Tony's American Dream. And it played up the fact that he was a guy who came here when he was 1 year old, didn't know any Spanish, didn't know anyone in Mexico. and yet he got deported back there. And of course, he had a wife and family, and so he came back, and then they wanted him to be an informant, and then he wouldn't be an informant. So they told him, Tony, you're really a slow learner. And he's back in Mexico again, and he tried to live there as a shepherd, not knowing Spanish. That didn't work out. He came back to his family. They found him a third time, and that time they tried to deport him under a federal criminal law, which criminalizes federally being a deported alien found in the United States. And there are thousands and thousands of people, Mark, who get prosecuted for being a deported alien. And they're all out of a bad movie. Somebody shows up for the quinceañera of their daughter. They just can't resist being there for that great event, or their daughter's marriage. And of course, ICE was there, and they collared the guy. And if he's been back here enough times, they actually prosecuted him. So I had a guy like that, and the reporter happened to be in the courtroom waiting for another federal case to be called. Mine got put in that slot while everyone was waiting around. The reporter thought my case was fascinating. Who are these dreamers? What about them? How many of them are there? And he played up the story. And Ali Mayorkas was then the U.S. attorney. And eventually the pressure of those stories on TV, I think it was Channel 13 in those days, that played it up really big. And then it was a front page story in the LA Times, Tony's American Dream. And it just got a huge amount of play. And then U.S. Attorney Mayorkas got involved in it. And it's so interesting because I always thought that I really had a major impact, and that case did, on his thinking. And of course, now he's a huge advocate at the Department of Homeland Security for the Dreamers and for DACA. So
the Dreamers and the statistics are incredible. I mean, you'd want every American to have the kind of statistics as to employment, education, et cetera, that those kids have. Now they're not kids, and they're grown up, a lot of them. But
he won the Emmy. The reporter, his name was Robert Rand. He won the Emmy. I think it was the local Emmy, or maybe it was an area-wide. But he won an Emmy. I was there at the Civic Light Orchestra in Pasadena. He and the client got to go up on the stage. I thought, as the attorney, you know what I mean? I was kind of pushing it. But the guy who won the Emmy, Robert Rand, and the client went up on stage.
That's funny. You try to get up there. Who's this guy?
Yeah, right. A huge story. And I was overdressed, as I usually am. And it was for an entertainment event, but it was sometimes yes, sometimes no, right? You could be in a tuxedo, or you could be like, but this is like, neither fish nor fowl. But he ran an 8.5-minute long story, which, for local TV is a long story. Ran it on July 4th, and it was called Tony's American Dream. It featured us all playing wiffle ball in the backyard of a house that Tony had managed to live in, get a good job, live with his wife, had these 3 adorable kids, and they wanted to deport him back to. It was like Born in East LA. He really was a guy who got plugged back in Mexico. He didn't know anything about Mexico. He didn't even speak Spanish.
Insanity. That's the insanity that informs so much of the policy right now. Tell me about this immunity case, which the Supreme Court has now decided to take. I also wonder if you could just touch on what I think is the lunacy. I mean, it's consistent, though, with his ridiculousness. Clarence Thomas not going to recuse himself, but a case that has breadcrumbs that lead directly to his wife.
Well, Clarence Thomas has violated these ethical standards, and the problem is that there's no ethical board above the Supreme Court that can hold him to account. Part of it is we have a separation of powers, and the idea is if there were any executive branch or legislative branch that could hold the judiciary to account, the idea would be, violate the separation of powers. Now, it may not seem like that to some people, because since Marbury v. Madison, we see the Supreme Court kind of telling other branches what to do. They told President Truman he couldn't take over the steel mills. But their way to do that is because they say it's a violation of the Constitution, and their job is to enforce the Constitution. Likewise, when they strike down a statute, they say, well, that statute is unconstitutional, and we have to interpret the Constitution. But because of this idea that no one branch can kind of stand over and, control or patrol the other branch, there's no one around to control or patrol Thomas. And if you set up a judicial, there's like the judicial conference. How come the judicial conference can't do it? And that's because he is superior in rank to every other judge and anybody they could put on the judicial conference. And I suppose you could have then, what do you come up with? The U.S. Supreme Court could decide what is okay for the U.S. Supreme Court. And people say, well, that would be terribly uncollegial. Well, if you do something really terrible and your 8 colleagues think it's doing something really terrible, it's more important that a member of that body not do something terrible or be stopped from doing it than that there be a lack of collegiality on the group of 9. But we just haven't seen it that way. So one of the things that he is subject to, he's subject to normal criminal prosecution. So if he didn't pay his federal income tax, it would be extremely controversial. But yes, the IRS could investigate him for not paying his federal income tax. And if there were, red flags, if there were badges of criminal fraud, he could even be prosecuted for tax evasion. And we have seen high officials, Vice President Agnew, was prosecuted for tax evasion and had to resign. We've certainly had senators who've been charged with crimes. And so a legislative branch member being charged by an executive branch member, the U.S. attorney charging Senator Menendez, that doesn't violate our separation of powers. But unless Thomas were prosecuted for a criminal violation by the Department of Justice, and it would be hugely controversial. It could happen, but it would be hugely controversial. We're kind of at this impasse where he gets to really rule on his own ethics. And in my opinion, I don't think he has a sense of ethics like you or I or like your normal listener does. And so things like ruling on his wife's case, matters that are extremely important to his wife, that his wife's taken a position on, he has not recused himself. Now, he has recused himself from a couple of cases, but certainly there's no consistent pattern where, the average reasonable person like us would say, no, that if it's not an absolute appearance of a conflict of interest, it certainly is the appearance of a conflict of interest. If they're trying to get records that his wife made calls supporting the insurrection, and he's ruling on a case where you either allow the special prosecutor to get those records, some implicating his wife, or not get those records, some implicating his wife, and you rule on that case, any other judge in America, that would be deemed by the Judicial Commission or by a higher court to be a conflict of interest, Mark, but not. He's too high right now to be subject to those rules to be imposed by anybody in the other 3 branches of government, and the U.S. Supreme Court and Roberts don't want to impose that, I guess, in the name of collegiality.
Yeah, that's just so absurd. As you say, there's no supervisory body above the Supreme Court, and that situation that you were just describing with the texts, et cetera, that's not a hypothetical. That literally happened. So it's I think it's just an affront to the system that supposedly you're supposed to be the apex of, which is the justice system, fairness, right? It's so clearly unfair and sideways. So now let's talk about the immunity case and the timing of the immunity case and the realities concerning that, please, David.
Well, again, you can find fault elsewhere. You can say that, Merrick Garland, as the Attorney General, took too long to make a referral. Why did he need to be nudged by the January 6th committee? Some people say, well, Chrissy Hutchinson was a real game changer. And once Chrissy Hutchinson and her account, her inside information of the things that were going on, that was awfully important. But it does seem to people like Merrick Garland could have made that referral a lot earlier. Given when he made that referral, Jack Smith has moved along with alacrity. And from the Supreme Court's point of view, and I know that critics can say they sure moved Bush v. Gore faster, and they moved this Colorado Supreme Court case faster. But from their point of view, starting to kick this around in December or January and having a full-blown argument toward the end of April, from the Supreme Court's point of view, I think they felt like, well, they weren't pushing it too far down the road. This kind of made some sense. If I had been on the court, if I had been the 5th vote on the court, I would have said, let's have the argument 2 or 3 weeks earlier. There's millions of lawyers over this. They can file their briefs faster. You don't need to give the average litigant might need 3 weeks, or their lawyers might need 3 weeks to get something in, but not this case. This case is all lawyered up. It's all ready to go. You could have the opening briefs in a week. You could have the replies in a week, right? You could have the argument a week later. And they could have picked up about a month, I think. Let's say they could have had it March or the end of March, not the end of April. Having said that, if they think it's clear, they could make a decision. They could say, we're finding that there's no presidential immunity, a detailed order to follow. But right then that the mandate, the order from a higher court to a lower court, the mandate would arrive in front of the district judge in Washington, D.C., Chutkan. And she would say, okay, now I've got the mandate. There's going to be an opinion coming down, but I've got the mandate that the trial can go forward despite the claim of presidential immunity. I know I talked about 88 days, but you guys have been hearing about this. There's been a little bit of news about the fact that this might get resolved in favor of the idea of the trial going forward. You got to move this stuff along. You don't have 88 days anymore. You have 40 days. Get your motions in by then, get your replies in by then, get your jury questionnaire. So I suppose they could rule in May, March, and the trial could start in July. A trial in July in Washington, D.C. I was a law clerk that included the summers in Washington, D.C. and kind of a moonscape, right? Some days with that heat coming down, that 98% humidity. But
I grew up there. It's brutal. Yeah,
it's the jurors in there in air-conditioned cars.
Yeah, it's the office buildings are air conditioned, and yeah, but you definitely don't want to walk from the courthouse anywhere else. You can, it presses the limits of human tolerance to even walk 20 feet in that weather. But you think that a July trial actually could happen, or a July case could actually be deliberated then?
Yeah, I think so. There'll be a lot of complaints that, it's a rush to judgment. They weren't given enough time to make the motions and stuff like that. I think it would be helpful for Jack Smith to make even clearer that, he expects to make a motion to expedite. He'll certainly be ready to go with whatever needs to be ready to go, and to strongly suggest that the defense attorneys do the same thing, because in this extraordinary case, he doesn't think that there should be excludable time or delay. And remember, it's the same argument that there's an interest in the defendant having a speedy trial, but there's also an interest in the government having a speedy trial, and the public interest here is overwhelming. Would people have a right to know? I believe this very strongly. People have a right to know whether a jury of his peers finds Trump guilty or not guilty. And if it's not guilty, let that word go out before the election that he was found not guilty. But he acts so much like a person who doesn't even think that that's a possible verdict. He so acts like he's going to be found guilty of everything, liable of everything. And it's been kind of lost in the shuffle how he's lost everything, because he ended up winning this Colorado case. And that Colorado state case, you talked about it right from the beginning, that not only did you think that it had not good repercussions, because what goes around could come around, and they could find Democratic candidates to have engaged in some kind of cooked up insurrection. Trump's was not a cooked up insurrection, but I can see them down in Texas or Wyoming coming up with a cooked up insurrection, try to knock a Democrat and make their life difficult. So you saw that issue coming, and I think we also saw coming that this was just not going to work. And we even speculated that they might say it had to go through Congress, which is exactly what they decided. There is one interesting issue, if I could talk about the Colorado case and the insurrectionist. There were 3 or 4 dissenters, and I think it was very unclear, because a lot of people said, it's unanimous, it was all BS, and Trump was right, and he got even all 9 of them to agree. 9 of them agreed that what Colorado was about to do didn't make sense. It was just too disruptive, and this was a part of the Constitution that they hadn't ever interpreted, so they didn't really have precedent to follow. And given that they were deciding it from whole cloth, the idea that it would be so disruptive to the country, I think that was a fair thing for them to take into account. The others, though, did not agree, the 4, except for the fact that it was so disruptive that it necessarily made sense. So think about this thing. An insurrectionist, one of the people who went into the Capitol, either convicted or maybe even someone who's not been convicted. But your argument is that they're an insurrectionist, and now they're prosecuting you in federal court. They're a U.S. attorney that's been appointed. Can you make a motion to say, this person is not validly holding their job? They're an insurrectionist. They should never have been appointed. That's not that disruptive. That doesn't disrupt a presidential election. Can you say this prosecution of me is invalid? Like if this guy didn't have a badge at all, right? I'm being prosecuted by some guy who walked into the federal building and started prosecuting me. This guy has no authority. An insurrectionist may have no authority in the same sense. They all thought you should be able to make a motion like that, that if there was any insurrectionist appointed to any office, you could challenge either the acts of that insurrectionist. That's what the 5 said no. The 5 said this cannot be enforced at all unless it goes through Congress. And it seems very improbable, because they know what's going on the Supreme Court. They know Washington. It seems so improbable, Mark, that it would ever get the votes of Congress. But 4 would have kept it alive, not for this situation, but for the situation of some insurrectionist who then exercises power. And of course, just to finish the sort of the outline of the decision, then the answer back would be, would it apply to Trump? Okay, so Trump does become president again, and then Trump does something. We're not keeping him off the ballot, but do his acts have authority because he is an insurrectionist? Does everything he does become invalid? And maybe that's what the 5 who were thinking logically said, you know what, we're going to just put this thing to bed. But the 4 would have kept open the idea that at least for inferior officers, because remember, there's also the whole argument that it doesn't apply to the president. So I guess they could decide later on, it doesn't apply to the president, but it does apply to every officer appointed. And if any of them is an insurrectionist, they don't have a right to hold their office, and therefore any acts they take, like a prosecution of somebody, would be invalid because they're invalidly holding their position because they're an insurrectionist.
Right. But it's sort of the what is the fruit of the poison tree or something of the poison fruit?
The fruit of the poisonous tree. Very good.
Yeah, very good.
Mark,
Thank you, everybody.
Mark, you want to come work for me part-time?
All right. So I have one more question about the immunity, and then I want to circle around to something that is happening in New York City that we had questions about in terms of its legality, and I'll get to it in a second. But on the immunity, does this mean that the Supreme Court is going to individually evaluate or get to a point where they'll be individually evaluating acts by Trump, like whipping up the mob, failing to intercede to knock the mob down, to the slate of fake electors? I mean, these are things that exist individually that all woven together are part of the insurrection, but any one of the things could be viewed as insurrectionist. And I'm wondering if the Supreme Court is that the way they're going to do it? Or are they going to rule on this guy who you're seeing right now, Trump? He's president, and any president has that immunity because all those things that he did that I just mentioned, all those things he did while in office.
The way they answered the question, they're going to decide, does he enjoy, and to what extent does he enjoy, presidential immunity?
It'll be sweeping, you're saying. It'll be sweeping immunity.
It was a sweeping way that they said that. Commentators have said that it should be, does he enjoy immunity for what he's charged with? So the idea of thinking about philosophically, what about if a president only had one, shot at Osama bin Laden, but let's say he was on U.S. soil, and it has to be a really quick decision. It doesn't get authorized by the normal thing. He's got to give the order, take out Osama bin Laden while he's, you make it a good hypothetical. He's about to get on a ship and leave, or a plane, and somewhere it was safe to kill him, but he's going to get somewhere where it presents more issues. We really don't need to think about that kind of an issue. We don't need to think about some of the outer perimeters, as they're saying. This is in the inner perimeter. I'm sorry, this is way beyond the outer perimeter. It's way beyond the outer perimeter because, he can make this argument that he was counting the vote. And so everything that you do to steal an election would be counting the vote. I mean, what despot who wanted to hold on to power, who wanted to cling to power illegally, wouldn't say, oh, well, I was just counting the vote because I was sure it was going to come out my way. If you're going to say that's an official act, if you're going to say all these things are official acts, then you really are saying that you have a king, and that there's no remedy for not leaving. You ought to do as much as you can to have a coup on the way out of office if you can see that you're going to be a one-term president. And so this whole idea that we have a peaceful transfer of power, Mark, which is really a hallmark of the country, we don't even think that much about it because we're so spoiled.
That's the problem. We've really gotten fat and happy on a lot of things. Yeah.
So I think it's all going to come out all right. I think the worst that they're going to do is delay this. I think if you're kind of betting money on it, they come out and say that for what he's charged with here, there's at least some of it that is not covered by presidential immunity. And therefore, the case can go to trial if they decide that in the very end of June, and then she curtails the trial not to be 88 days later, but let's say 60 days later. So then you have a trial that begins July 1st, August 1st, September 1st. That really could happen. We could really have that trial starting September 1st. That would be with jury selection. Would we really have a verdict? It might be one of those October surprises, that we have.
Maybe. I mean, if it'll have any effect. I mean, it seems as though a lot of his support, of course, is baked in. But there are those who, I think it would still be pretty big news. But anyway, I want to now totally change gears and ask you about something that they're doing in New York. I was sharing with everyone in a story last hour about how the governor there has called on the National Guard to populate the subway trains in New York City because the situation with crime has become so out of control. Kim and I were kicking it around. I'm kind of a, tough, I wish there were more cops everywhere guy because I've seen a lot of urban crime make people feel insecure. It affects business. It affects life in San Francisco, New York City, et cetera. And they've had a rise in crime there on the subway of 45% year to year. So for this reason, the governor in New York, again, Kathy Hochul, has said that she wants National Guard soldiers and state police officers to patrol New York City subway platforms. Now, that's fine, but this gets to the question we have for you, which is they'll be able to check riders' bags as well beginning this week. And Kim brought up the point that she feels as though she feels her privacy is being violated, but it also, I said, well, let's ask David Katz about the legality of it.
Well, I think probably it's going to be held to be illegal, at least a challenge under federal law, whether it violates some state law. There was a whole controversy over stop and frisk, and that was challenged in federal court. And the allegation was that especially minority youth was stopped much more than non-minority youth and much more than older people, and that the stop and frisk was being done in a discriminatory way. That was when Mayor Bloomberg was in there. So they may have passed some legislation, Mark and Kim, that will make this improper, or there may be certain ways that they do it improperly. But I was a law student when this whole idea of magnetometer searches came in, and it was a hot issue, I think, in moot court, whether you could have this magnetometer search that we're now all used to when you go into a courthouse, and of course the most famous one when you get on an airplane. And there are obviously security risks getting on an airplane that are a little bit different from getting on a subway. But I can see where you could also make an analogy. And so I think that probably it's legal. I think that they're going to rethink it.
You think it's legal to...
Probably, yes, I think it's probably legal. You're getting on a conveyance, which can be dangerous. You're in a small space. It's not as much as an airplane, but I don't see how legally it would be that distinguished from an airplane. But what I was saying is from a policy point of view, it's so time consuming. People get on the subway because it's fast. They have to get somewhere. If you've got to build in 15, 20 minutes even for a search, that is going to dissuade people from taking the subway. And so I just don't think it's going to work.
Although I have to say, David, just as a rejoinder, I would suggest getting knifed or getting ripped off on the subway will also discourage people from getting on the subway.
Mark, yeah, it's such an interesting point that you make, and believe me, I'm sympathetic to it. I'm in New York a lot, and I rarely take the subway. I might take if you have to go out to Brooklyn, it's so much faster. Because it goes very fast through Manhattan, and then it goes right under the river, and you pop out at the Brooklyn Federal Court. So I don't know anyone who doesn't take the subway to Brooklyn Federal Court. And when there's something great like the U.S. Open, or there's a Yankee or a Mets game, it's so fast to get there. And you're not sitting around like in the Dodger parking lot for 45 minutes thinking, oh my God, I should have left in the seventh inning. But it's a huge, the amount of crime actually has not gone up as much as people think. A lot of it really is perception, Mark. I'm not trying to just tell you because the Democrats are in charge there. I'm calling it as I see it. But the statistics show, as in much of the country, crime is down under Biden. Crime is actually somewhat down in the subway. But no matter what happens, it makes the front page of the New York Post. The New York Post and Murdoch are always saying, oh my God, the Democrats aren't keeping you safe. And so after a while, perception becomes reality, doesn't it? If you're scared to get on a subway, and then you're not getting on a subway, and then people think it's not safe. And it's really not much alternative for working people in decent weather. A lot of people walk in New York, but the cabs are so expensive. That's not really much of an alternative for working people.
And I'm just looking at the stats to actually, because I want to be fair to the problem. And this is just kind of interesting. I know we're West Coast and everything, but this is a major city. And I think it's also, we deal with a lot of these issues in San Francisco, Los Angeles, et cetera, West Coast cities. Grand larceny, that's theft without the use of force. They were the main driver of the January spike in crime, according to the cops. And crime rates are down in February. As David Katz has said, the overall rise in major crimes for the year as of March 3rd was only 13%. So that is down considerably from the 45% that I mentioned. But still, people are feeling insecure on this. It's an artery in New York. I mean, it's a critical, as you suggested, transportation artery in New York, the subway.
And Mark, is the grand larceny on the subway? The grand larceny, I think, is like we have out here in California with retail theft, isn't it?
Well, they say a 45% spike in major crimes in January compared with the same time last year. Grand larcenies, thefts without the use of force, were a main driver of the January spike in crime, according to police. So you're right; it probably includes areas outside of the subway. In fact, it must be areas because their police define it as with homicides, assaults, and robberies, those major crimes. So you're right; those don't even include the subway. Yeah.
And Mark, to say this, if they're sending 1,000 National Guards troops into the subway, you do ask yourself, why didn't this happen earlier? It's like with some of the things, I mean, to be fair to Biden and Trump, some of the things that Biden's doing with the border, I mean, how come they weren't done earlier? And it does seem that things, tolerance of crime in the subways, if you want to call it that, the total disarray at the border. It does seem that maybe more could have been done about that, but I think you have to give people credit now. To keep saying to the governor of New York or to say to Biden, you came a little bit late. I mean, look at Trump. Trump did horrible things at the border, and you could understand why there was this reaction to so many toxic things that hurt the nation's, values, hurt our standing in the world, separating families and it being shown all over the world, and Trump's minions, bragging about it. You can see why when Biden came in there, he wanted to go in a different direction and his supporters wanted to go in a different direction. Did they go a little bit too far in one direction? Well, they're trying to pass a bill right now that acknowledges maybe we went a little bit too far. I mean, that's the beauty of politics, for people to not just stand there and make it like a screaming match, but to say, okay, if we went a little bit too far, I'm the kind of leader who's pulling back a little bit. Instead of like Trump, who it just seems it goes louder, loudest, even louder. Whatever direction he's in, no matter how wrong it is, he just doubles and triples down on it. I think we want to have a leader who says, you know what, if we went a little bit too far on some things at the border, if we went a little bit too far on asylum claims, let's pull that back, which is what his bill does that was drafted by the Republicans. And now the Republicans don't even want it because they'd rather run on the politics of the border than to do something about the border. Yeah, we don't want a president like that.
David, we will watch for you on all the various media outlets and appreciate you sharing sort of unvarnished views of things, including Adam Schiff. I mean, one of the things I love about the fact that you know Adam Schiff is the fact that you can tell us what he's really like, and you can give us a sort of an insider's view of him. And I think your respect for him means a lot because we respect you. So I'm so glad that we had a chance to visit this, and it was all prompted by this picture of the two of you together. But
well, it was great. It was great the other night, and the disruption that was reported. Again, that's something, what was he supposed to do? Go try to have the people beat up like Trump did, or just scream at the top of his lungs over them? I think he handled that like he handles so many things. I think your listeners should say, if I were in his shoes, what would I have done? And if you say, I would have done about the same thing, then you say to yourself, this is a person that I can relate to. Everyone says they want a politician who's like a normal person, thinks like a normal person, but they're much more smarter and more organized than a lot of average people. That's Adam Schiff. He's also got a wife named Eve. It really is Adam and Eve. And he's a super athlete. He's a super athlete. Triathlons, that sort of thing. I'll tell you what you should do, Mark. How about have him and Garvey debate on your show? You can be like the Larry
moderator.
King.
Well, I've moderated.
You can be Larry King like they debated NAFTA. Go for it.
I got.
What can you tell us about the scene?
Larry, thank you. I might be doing a debate. I'll tell you something, David Katz, this for next time. I have moderated a debate for the presidency of the United States. Did you know that?
No, but I'm even more impressed.
Well, it was in the television show 24, everybody, but it was, the point is I was still the they could have picked anybody is the point, David, but they chose me. All right.
And that's a huge point. And that's a huge point. All these things that we do are quite competitive. So congratulations.
David Katz. Thanks, David. Till next week. Appreciate it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, just as we wrap up, the White House physician under Trump, this guy, Ronnie Jackson, he's a congressman now. He was demoted by the Navy.
Uh-oh.
In July of 2022 after a Pentagon Inspector General's report substantiated allegations of inappropriate conduct and bullying of staff. Inappropriate conduct and bullying of staff. Citing a current defense official and a former U.S. official, the Washington Post is reporting that the previously unreported demotion lowered Jackson to the rank of captain instead of rear admiral. But he still describes himself, Ronnie Jackson does, as a retired rear admiral. That's on his congressional website. He's publicly referred to like that by his Republican allies, including Donald Trump. A Navy spokesperson said that the Navy had substantiated the allegations against Jackson, bullying subordinates and fostering a negative work environment and using alcohol inappropriately.
Oh, that sounds like a fun place to work.
Those things are not in keeping with the standards of the Navy, said the naval official who was contacted for corroboration.
What is the drop? There's a reason this place is fun. Yeah.
I don't know how fun it is.
There's a reason that this place is fun.
I thought you were going to say I'd be willing to bet my lunch that there's alcohol involved. Exactly.
I have 2 breaking stories.
All right.
You ready for them?
Please.
And they both involve airlines. It's almost like a stories from the sky, but no.
Well, is it a stories from the sky? Because we can rally as many stories from the sky. A turbo.
I think it is.
All right, Albert, can you do a turbo stories from the sky?
It depends on the airlines.
Albert does have a connection to an airline.
Both of these stories involve United Airlines in the they're very recent.
Ooh, a double
Are you ready?
one.
Man,
this
I guess, yeah.
is a turbo stories from the sky.
We have clearance, Clarence.
Roger, Roger. What's our vector, Victor?
Enough is enough! I have had it with these monkey-fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane! Everybody strap in!
News
Kim, you will be our stories from the sky correspondent. Please go ahead.
Breaking news at this hour from SFO. A United Airlines flight that took off from San Francisco International Airport has been diverted to Los Angeles International Airport after losing a tire during takeoff. According to flight tracking website FlightAware, the plane left San Francisco at 11:23 a.m. today. It was diverted to LAX about 25 minutes later. That flight was originally headed for Osaka, Japan, before losing a tire during takeoff. I don't know how they put it down at LAX with that. A runway at SFO was closed briefly. It has since reopened with no further impact. The aircraft is a Boeing 777-200.
Oh, those are gorgeous planes. So, but it did land safely.
This is, I don't know. It was
it's a developing
to
story.
LAX.
Would you call it a developing story?
I would call it a developing story. Absolutely. I don't know what happened when it landed at LAX. I don't know what it looked like.
But it did land.
It was diverted 25 minutes after takeoff at 11:23 a.m. So I'm thinking the timing is that it would have landed by now.
Well, I will say this too, Albert, and you know a little something about this. As my stories from the sky assistant, they can land that 777 with a tire gone. I mean, that's absolutely.
The singular one, yeah. There's for a 777, there's a set of tires in the back too, and in the front.
Thank
there's
God.
Like 3 sets. So
yeah. So
next, also from United Airlines, they are confirming a flight.
Before we continue, like if they did land it without the tire, that's very impressive. So
yes, it is. It is. Yeah. So they go from a tough spot to an impressive spot.
Also from United, they've confirmed now a flight from Houston to Fort Myers, Florida, had flames shooting from the engine before it turned around for an emergency landing.
What?
A video you see here, shared on Storyful, shows the flames as a crew member acknowledged the situation over the plane's loudspeaker. Take a look and take a listen.
I mean, this trigger warning for those who might be sensitive to lights because it's flashing a lot. So.
It is a lot of flashes. Yeah. Yeah. It's supposed to have sound, but it's basically the folks, the flight attendants are saying, acknowledging, yes, we do have an engine on fire. Yes, this is happening. The user who posted the video.
And thank you for flying United.
And thank you for flying United. They said they were about 15 minutes into this flight when this incident happened. Everybody deplaned normally. Another aircraft took them on to Florida. But yeah, they had to stop that plane as well.
I love that Kim uses the term deplaned. That's very, very stories from the sky. Nice job.
Lastly,
wow, those are big stories. Oh, there's one more?
Well, I have one more.
Wow.
Boeing has not turned over important records to investigators looking into the whole door plug situation earlier this year. Boeing signaling there are no records to even give them.
Oh, my God.
These are the records from the assembly line last fall that the NTSB thinks will show Boeing employees removed critical bolts that hold the plug in place and then didn't reinstall them before the plane left the factory in October of 2023. The plane, by the way, flew 150 commercial flights before the door plug got sucked out. The NTSB says Boeing has not provided us with the documents and information we have requested numerous times over the last month, specifically with respect to opening, closing, and removal of the door, and the team that does that work at the Renton facility. And
they've already had a whistleblower step forward on this. I mean, they know that they have issues, and it is outrageous that Boeing can push back like this. This is the ownership that Boeing has over the regulatory apparatus. It's absolutely outrageous.
I love it when you're angry.
Well, I am angry about this because I just see this regulatory creep.
Yeah.
The very things that are supposed to be entities, corporations, et cetera, that are supposed to be regulated by our government have such ownership and control over the government that they can get away with going, oh, you know what, there are just no records on that. Sorry. If we had them.
If you don't have records on that, that's a whole nother problem, right?
Of course. And there are records on them. I mean, this is just, it's outrageous. That's Stories from the Sky for today.
This has been Stories from the Sky. The captain has turned off the seatbelt sign, and you are now free to move about the cabin.
Well, we only have another minute or two, and I really do want to...
Sorry, that's my fault.
I do want to share something that is a little... it's not politics, and it's not scary transportation, and nobody's getting held up, and no one's getting ripped off. It's just an announcement. And it's an announcement from... If Daniel Day-Lewis had our major announcement, music and announcement, he would use it. He would use this.
A major announcement
from Daniel Day-Lewis. Daniel Day-Lewis, maybe the greatest actor of his generation, certainly among them, says that he's done with acting.
Oh, no.
Yep. He had said some time ago that he was through, but now he's like doubly through. I mean, this is the guy who, My Left Foot, In the Name of the Father, the boxer. He won the Oscar for Best Actor with My Left Foot, you know. He was nominated for it in the Name of the Father. He was in the P.T. Anderson film, There Will Be Blood. That was brilliant.
Gangs of New York was really good.
Yeah. He just has never done anything but terrific work. He apparently said, I don't want to be part of this industry anymore. He says that there's 7,000 choices among these streamers, and he says none of them are good. Film has moved out of the public domain into the private domain, he says. You know, you have a remote, you can stop it. It's not the same experience. He's frustrated with the way film has evolved into this super accessible but also much different experience. It's a kind of a gracious thing that he said. He's immensely grateful to all of his collaborators and the audiences over the many years. He says it's a private decision and he's not going to comment any further on it. But he also said that when he made Phantom Thread, he said, I didn't know I was going to stop acting. It just turned out that this is where he wants to draw the line. So uncharacteristic to put out a statement. But he says, I did want to draw a line. I didn't want to get sucked back into another project. That's why I'm announcing it. All my life, I've mouthed off about how I should stop acting, and I don't know why it was different this time. But the impulse to quit took root in me, and that became a compulsion. It was something I had to do. So Daniel Day-Lewis, no longer a part of any film that is currently in production or in future production, at least at this point. He's had enough.
Good day, sir.
Right. That's the word from Daniel Day-Lewis.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Well, Tumbleweed, are you kidding? How about you? Big shout out.
Big shout out.
Porter for governor, I'll take it. So Katie Porter moves out of the senatorial race, and now Tumbleweed wants to see Katie Porter for governor. Boy, that would be interesting, huh? You know,
I had suggested that in the chat, and I think she's responding to that. I think she'd be a great governor.
the ding meaning bad, the hit on Gavin Newsom among the many hits, some of them deserved, some of them not so much deserved, in my opinion, is that he's really beholden to a lot of old school political connections, that is, donors. So even in the French Laundry situation, they were all like, big medical, as I recall, donors, big, medical enterprises and corporate reps there at that French Laundry. You say the same thing with PG&E and the ownership of Gavin by PG&E. So you hear these criticisms. Now, Porter exists apart from all of that. She drives campaigns on small donors. She really is a crusader against corporate control and corporate power. So it would be interesting to have someone like that in the governor's chair in Sacramento. You have to be able to get things done.
Yeah.
You have to be able to work with a lot of these massive entities. Some of them are corporate entities. But yeah, it's provocative. I don't know that she's expressed any interest in that, but anyway. Love Katz and Law and Disorder. Yeah, big shout out to David Katz. I used to say this about David Katz. I used to tell Pat Thurston this. That's the best guest on KGO. I don't mean the best legal mind. I don't mean the best guest on your show. I mean the best guest on any show. Yeah. He's so good. Yeah. And it's just an absolute luxury, and I feel like the luckiest guy to have inherited him, And he's just, I'm just so grateful to him. So we've got to wrap up, don't we, Albert? Is that what's happening here?
Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I mean, I have more important things to say, Albert. I don't like to be wrapped up, but I guess it happens. We've covered Mark's Madness. If you haven't, jump on the video that explains how to sign up for Mark's Madness. It's fun. It's fun to have a bracket. It's fun to pick winners. If you're a regular or even a newcomer to the show, the video explains everything. So go to Mark's Madness in YouTube. Just Mark's Madness 2024. And the commish is there. He explains everything. And I'm there too. And we kind of take you through all the different sounds, all the different drops.
The science is ridiculous.
I don't think the science is ridiculous is in there. No,
but, it's not. Yeah, you have until next week, actually, to fill out your bracket.
Yeah, but
they do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
That's in there, though. Yeah. So the After Party Live is going down now. Yeah, and you can see Kim over there.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
You cannot see enough of Kim. Kim and John over with the After Party Live.
Bye.
Albert, thank you. Till tomorrow. Bye-bye.